Right, instead our focus to this now. Water Minister Senzo Mchunu has issued a stern warning to municipalities over the collection of revenue from consumers. He warns that a growing culture of non-payment will eventually result in collapse of critical infrastructure. The Minister joins us now for a broader conversation. Minister, good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on tonight here on In Focus. Water interruptions have been happening for years, if one has to be really honest, but there is certainly a feeling that things have scaled up, and not only scaled up, but scaled up quite dramatically, which says that the situation has deteriorated, the system has deteriorated. So freshwater challenges are becoming quite at an increasing rate and putting a lot of pressure in terms of the availability of fresh water use. What is clear is that there are 4, possible maybe 5 reasons for this. 1, leakages, burst pipes, above average consumption, of course power outages, and maybe we can add to that water pollution also adding some of these pressures. Are we lacking capacity to act?
Well, I would say not at all, but qualify it. But first, I want to say to South Africans and to you, South Africa is a dry country, water scarce, we all know that, and we need to conserve water. Use water sparingly yourself, and then tell others. But the second point is that we just have enough water resources in the country for our responsible use. All of us, just enough.
Yeah.
Not in abundance, but just enough. If using it sparingly, responsibly, yeah, we just have enough. And of course, we are developing more water resources, yeah, storages in the country, and adding water from other sources, including from Lesotho, yeah, and via bigger schemes that are in the offing currently. Yeah. But getting on, switching over to water services, yes, now moving water from the resources to households.
Yes.
That is where we have a challenge of a nature that we've just spoken about. The first problem, we have not been maintaining our infrastructure for quite a long time. This means that the pipes have grown old and older, and even beyond description in some cases, not replacing them, renewing them, such that even if you return to operating them and maintaining them, there's hardly anything to maintain in some cases. I mean, if a pipe is 100 years, 120 years, 90 years and so on, without it being properly checked and cross-checked. Now, we're at a stage where the bulk of our underground infrastructure in municipalities has gone deteriorated. Yeah. But what are we doing just on this? Yeah. We are encouraging municipalities, and I'm from a meeting with all municipalities in Gauteng and mayors, and we're talking in one voice, and we're checking and monitoring what they said in March, what they are saying now in terms of investments, even in terms of private sector investments, yes, some facilitated by us via our partnership office with DBSA and other businesses. But it's not just pipes. We would have needed to actually monitor our pump stations, monitor our reservoirs, yeah, along with pipes. Yeah. So this is what we mean by water infrastructure.
Okay.
It's pipes, it's pump stations, it is reservoirs, and of course, it also means water treatment plants
Right.
But the problems that we have is not so much on treatment plants, although in a number of cases you are squeezed because of their capacity. But data says that that's not, it's pipes in the main and then pumps, and then lack of adequate storage capacity in the form of reservoirs. So we see these problems, which means that we have a capacity to see, to analyze, to agree and conclude that there's a problem.
Right.
And we're addressing these matters now vigorously, even though we have reduced funding, but we are dealing with the problem.
So one, which is part of your draft plan as far as the National Water Resource Strategy, is creating effective water sector institutions, but two, collecting the data, analyzing the information, and being able to manage that information. Let's take a step back and talk about the aspect of creating effective water sector institutions. Would you say you are there right now in terms of authorities both at national and regional level? Because it seems we are unable to come up with the necessary solutions at that particular level.
Not currently. Our department, which is a lead in terms of the water sector in the country, is fully functional. And secondly, in terms of institutions, there are those that are in place, there are those that we are building up. Now, number one, the water service authorities, which are municipalities designated by COCTA as such, are there, but they don't function in their full capacity, in the sense that they are affected by both objective and subjective matters. And the dominating one is subjective, in the sense of legal capacity, less skills or low skills in managing water, and the fact that there is a deficit because of the time when we have not been upfront in managing water services in the country. And now municipalities, as water service authorities, as institutions, are at a level where they need a lot of assistance than what they are able to offer on their own. Now, this takes me to the third issue, which is water ports. Seeing this matter, we then have strengthened our water ports via reconfiguration. We're almost done. All 7, from 9 to 7, are now fully functional. They are in place. They are renewed. And we're working ways and means of working with municipalities. I'm from a meeting, as I said. And Rand Water, as an example, is getting very closer to working with Mfuleni to deal with the remainder of the challenges there.
Give us an example. Sorry, Minister, let me come in. Give us an example there, because the building capacity for action aspect is the third one, which is quite critical. And you've already mentioned that at the local water authority level, there lacks capacity for action. So give me an example of how Rand Water is, for example, going to work with Mfuleni, where I believe in some instances water, close to 70% of the water is lost. That is non-revenue water.
Yes, huge losses. You remember, Mfuleni is under Section 63, which is directly administered by us. And it started at a time when they were under 139, which is directly administered by Gauteng municipality, by Gauteng government. And that's in terms of requirement of Section 63. You don't intervene with it alone, which is something that we are amending. Now, they have done some work. They've advanced with the work, fixing their pumps, fixing which they are still doing. Pumps are by and large completed. But what is not completed are the 4 water treatment plants. Wastewater treatment works in the areas of Mfuleni and Midvaal, but they are getting their attention. And then treatment plants, water treatment plants, are fairly functional, but where there was a problem was on your stations, pump stations. And then they are now in pipes. They're in Spokane, Sharpeville, all those areas. There are no less than 24 contractors that are on the ground, changing pipes, replacing them, and not just fixing a leak here and there, but actually, that doesn't mean that there are no problems. There are still problems, but they are advancing. Now, they are attending to that. We give them money. They are using money properly. They have bought vehicles. They have set up workshops, equipped them to say, if you are running a wastewater treatment plant, this is the kind of equipment that you need. They are training their staff, but we see that that's not enough, simply because the imbalances there, which are historical, are not going to enable them fully to turn things around quickly. And therefore, the next era is where Mfuleni is discussing with Rand Water with the possibility of appointing them as a water and sanitation service provider, which came from our recent interpretation in terms of the Water Services Act, that it does allow separation between the Water Service Authority and the water service provider, to whom we issue a license, but they work under and via an SLA, service level agreement.
So let's explain that a little bit more, Minister. You're saying it would be something similar when I'm hearing you to what's happening, for example, in the city of Johannesburg. Certain areas are provided electricity by Eskom directly, while other areas are using the municipality city power to get their electricity.
Exactly, because Johannesburg has an entity called Johannesburg Water, which is their entity, and to which we'll issue a license the whole this year. When that entity fails to provide services at the level that is required, we then withdraw the license, or we tell them you are now not compliant. We are going to withdraw the license, and then we say to Johannesburg, please appoint another entity or another provider, failing which we are going to do it ourselves, withdraw and appoint, and so on. So, and we're upfront with these things because we want to turn the situation around. But it is happening elsewhere. In the morning, we were with Makana municipality in the Eastern Cape, where they are saying they see a turnaround as a result of the involvement of Amatola Water. And you were aware that on Tuesday we in Etegwini, where Umgeni Utugela is going to take over 10 wastewater plants, which represent 90% of their sewer processing, and they are going to refurbish them, they are going to O&M them, and they are going to turn the situation, even train their people so that when they leave, you leave better staffing in terms of turning the situation around. We're all over municipalities intervening, and we're working with them incrementally. And there's no doubt that the efforts, even though were affected in a way by lack of abundant money, but with the money that we're able to scrap around and find, the money that is in the fiscus, that is in terms of grants, and then we squeeze them, we turn them around to say, no, don't do this, don't use this, remove this program, start this program. We are seeing quite a promising era that we're getting into. It's not going to be like this all the time, and which means that we're no longer working from the ivory tower ourselves as water and sanitation. We're very much into working with municipalities. We're not replacing them. Yes. We're not undermining them. We're just backing them up very, very close to say no, because we have better skills, better personnel, and so on. This is what we think will work, and where they agree with us, we then move on. But in some cases, of course, we're in Likwa, we're dealing with their water treatment plant, refurbishing it. They've been under pressure for quite a long time. We have even taken them to court, but we're working with them now to turn the situation around. So,
could you give us a quantum of the backlog of investment? How much did we not invest, and that you now have to cover? I mean, it's 20 years worth of lack of investment in some instances. How much are you having to put in order for you to cover that lack of investment?
The world has instructed, via the United Nations, has instructed the water sector worldwide to raise upwards of $30 billion by 2030. And therefore, and in Africa as a continent, we have also been given that instruction that we work and raise this money as a continent. And we have institutions, or we have a high-level panel that is dealing with this matter at world level and continental level. But we ourselves, as a country, we are saying the same thing, that we just have to raise this money, $30 million $30 billion and of course, we are calculating and saying, if we don't make $30 billion and distribute it in accordance with the needs for each of our countries throughout the world and the continent, what is it that we can do? Of course, there's no, I would say there's no limit, because damages to infrastructure is happening as we talk.
Yeah.
And therefore the debt is escalating.
Right.
But we have to take care and say, what are we able to resolve each year? And we're at a stage where we feel, let me make an example. We have concluded on, Lesotho Highlands water project is now running. It required 40 billion. And TCTA has raised money in the private sector with a little bit of input from the fiscus. And we know to augment water for Gauteng requires 40 billion by 2027. And that has happened. The project is underway. And that scheme will feed Gauteng. It will feed part of Mpumalanga. It will feed Free State, Northwest, and Northern Cape, 5 provinces already. And then we know we need Mkomazi in KZN. It requires 23 billion, and that scheme must be running by 2030, because that other side, it is red. The deficit will be huge, such that water services will stall. That's why we're chasing it. We're happy that it is now back on track. And then we go to Limpopo, we go to other provinces. We work on the basis of what each province requires by when and how much would be. In Limpopo, we're running a scheme of 24 billion rand that will supply water to the greater part of Sekhukhune up to Polokwane, because Polokwane doesn't have water. And then there are several other bigger schemes in Limpopo that we are running. Mpumalanga, we are in the middle of Loskop scheme, which will supply water in the upper part or in Kangala areas. But we still have to look at Hlanzeni, but at the moment they are fine. Northwest has a huge deficit. We are running a big scheme there that we're going to start very soon. So we have these big schemes that will ensure water security, but we are no longer stopping at just securing provinces on water via large schemes. But we are now on reticulation, taking care that municipalities, as water arrives, as the situation of bulk water improves, right, they must reticulate, because the bigger question is, why do we have full dams, but we have dry taps? That is the question.
Let's talk about that very quickly before we run out of time. Minister, in Gauteng, in the city of Johannesburg in particular, we are hearing of a concept that you're saying it's an interim concept that you've introduced called water shifting. And the reason for this is really a pressure issue. When water has got to go upstream, it needs a lot of pressure. And because of the things that we've already spoken about, leakages, power outages, and so on and so forth, it is not getting that pressure. And you're trying to remedy that situation by this intervention called water shifting. How else are you planning in the future to address that particular issue because primarily when I see it, it's not pretty much what we can do as citizens, even though we can, of course, use less because that also contributes. But it's something that government would need to do in terms of makeshift alternatives when the power is not there to ensure that we continue to have that pressure.
One, Gauteng municipalities, because we are from a more than 3 hour meeting with them, all of them, one by one reporting. What came as the so-called crisis, by and large, has subsided. We asked each one of them, what areas are not getting water currently? With your meetings, they meet twice. Technical teams are meeting twice a day to check one another, or whether you have enough water in your area, you have enough pressure. Because some of the municipalities like Naledi get their water from a reservoir that belongs to Rand Water via pressure that builds in the reservoir, which then allows once it needs to be at around 70% or so to release enough pressure to supply for them to say it's gravitational pressure to give to supply Naledi. Once the reservoir is around 53, 54, 55, it means that pressure is reduced and gravitation slows down. Now, this is what we say. They must communicate. They must manage 24/7. They know when to switch water at night, where, and so on, to fill up that system and so on. But this is not a permanent thing. Remember what happened is that we had our systems, particularly Zekerbosch, which is the second primary water treatment plant supplying Gauteng. What happened there is there was a 4-hour outage of power supply.
Yes.
And once you have that situation with, combined or coinciding with a high demand from middle of August, which we noticed that they were given notice by Rand Water to say, we are noticing rising consumption. Please call a meeting. We called a meeting with municipalities to say, your consumption is getting higher. And what's happening? Can you manage demand and supply? So we knew that we're getting to a problematic situation. So one is power supply. Two, high demand. But we have now saying, look, there were two enemies. Non-revenue water. That is water that gets lost because people are illegally connecting. Water is being used by people who are not necessarily in the system. It's just like giving water out. But then there are direct leaks. Direct leaks in Gauteng, the lowest direct leak in a municipality is at 21%.
21% indeed.
Now, which is very high because it is far more than 15, which is normally allowed, and so on. So we're tackling these problems right away and head on.
Minister, I have to ask this before I let you go. I know you come up from a meeting with the Gauteng government, which says to me you've ironed out your communication issues. A mayor said he didn't know the meeting. A premier also says he didn't know you had called a meeting. Have you sorted out the channel of communication and it's now above board?
It's fixed. It is in place. It was by and large lack of reporting because, as Mayor of Johannesburg said, the MMC was there, and we were not saying this in bad faith. The fact that the MMC was there means that there had been some form of communication, but we have agreed to strengthen that, to make sure that information flows to everybody and adequately and all the time. And we have agreed on that. We're together today, and the outcomes, everybody is happy with the outcomes of today's meeting.
I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on and giving us this time on In Focus today. That's the Minister of Water and Sanitation there, Senzo Mchunu.